Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, The Fallen Pages. Today's book is We Computers, a Ghazal Novel by Hamid Ismailov. There are novels that tell stories, and there are novels that behave like mirrors smashed on the floor. We Computers, a Ghazal Novel belongs to the second category. You do not read it in the ordinary sense, you gather it. You kneel before its shards and try to recognize your own face in the broken geometry. And every time you think you understand what it is doing, the book slips sideways, becomes something else, becomes a poem, a confession, a political archive, a machine humming in a dark room, a lament sung by civilization that has learned to store memory but forgotten how to bear it. Hamid does something audacious from the first breath. He takes the form of the ghazal, that ancient architecture of longing, rupture, repetition, beloved absence, and transforms it into a modern narrative engine. The ghazal was never built for tidy continuity. It was made of couplets that can stand alone, each complete, each wounded, each luminous, yet somehow bound by a recurring refrain. Hamid understands that this form is perfect for the fractured consciousness of the modern world, because we no longer live in epics. We live in fragments, notifications, archives, exiled data, memory shards. So the structure itself becomes the thesis. The novel moves in segments, scenes, meditations, recollections, emotional pulses. Characters appear not always as fixed identities in the book, but as recurring presences. They are less bodies than frequencies. Abdul Hamid, the reflective consciousness, moving through displacement and remembrance. Shiraz, who becomes not merely a person but a figure of desire in the book. Homeland, beauty, loss, and attainable coherence. Voices pass through the text like travelers in the fog inside the book. They return altered, sometimes clearer, sometimes more distant, and like files reopened after years and years ago. This is why the title is brilliant and chilling. We Computers, not the computers, not those computers. It accuses the reader before the first page has settled. Because the novel asks whether modern humanity has become computational without becoming wise. There is an implied sentiment running through the text, something like we remember everything and understand almost nothing. That is the sickness of our age, of our time. Infinite stories, shallow meanings. The ghazal form intensifies this. A repeated refrain in classical ghazal returns like a lover's name or the tolling of fate. Here repetition behaves like memory loops. Trauma loops, ideological loops. You think you have escaped a thought, then it returns wearing a different coat. And suddenly we are in the territory of Nietzsche. Eternal recurrence is not abstract philosophy here. It becomes psychological weather. The same patterns replay in politics, in relationships, in civilizations. We tell ourselves history moves forward, but Hamid quietly laughs at this illusion. History circles, it mutates, it evolves, it wears new uniforms. And uniforms matter in this book because behind the lyricism stands the long shadow of empire, ideological violence. The Soviet inheritance is felt not always through direct statement but through atmosphere. Surveillance, files, controlled speech, collective identity imposed from above. The we of totalitarian systems. You feel Joseph Stalin as an aftertaste. You feel the administrative cruelty that turns souls into records. There is an unspoken terror in any regime that loves statistics more than faces. That is where the title cuts deepest. A computer does not hate you, it simply processes you. Many tyrannies have dreamed of such efficiency. Hitler fetishized classification, hierarchy, racial sorting. Stalin fetishized files, quotas, engineered narratives. And different ideologies, same appetite. Convert human complexity into manageable categories. The novel senses this pattern. It knows that whenever the systems become supreme, persons become expendable. Yet Hamid, the writer, is too subtle to preach. He lets form do the work. Characters blur because authoritarian history blurs them. Many fractures because political violence fractures lineage. Home becomes myth because exile turns geography into ideology. And exile is central here. To lose a homeland is to experience a secular version of Eden's expulsion. In the Bible, Adam leaves the garden and inherits toil. In Islamic consciousness, exile from spiritual nearness is one of the deepest metaphors of the human condition. In Jewish memory, dispersion and return form an entire sacred rhythm. Hamid taps this subterranean current. His displaced figures do not merely miss a place, they miss ontological stability, they miss the right arrangement of reality in the book. Then Shiraz then can be read as beloved, city, muse, memory, paradise, lost language, like Layla in Persian, and Arabic poetry, like Beatrice in the Divine Comedy. These are the characters in the book. Like the absent center in every mystic tradition. And this is where the novel becomes almost Sufi-like. The ghazal historically lives in the space where romantic longing and divine longing kiss each other and exchange masks. When the speaker cries for the beloved, do they mean a person, God, homeland, truth, beauty, selfhood? The answer is yes. Hamid inherits that ambiguity and modernizes it. His beloved are also memory structures. His absences are historical. You can hear echoes of Abu Hamid al-Ghazali here. Al-Ghazali, the scholar, warned that information without purification becomes vanity, and intelligence can become a whale. In We Computers, the book, knowledge accumulates everywhere, but wisdom limps behind it. Data multiplies and spirit thins. And then Ibn Sina enters by implication in the book. Ibn Sina asked what the self is beneath sensation, beneath the body, beneath circumstance. If a person floated suspended, deprived of sensory input, would they know they exist? Ismailov gives the inverse experiment in the book. What happens when a person is flooded with signals, with archives, with histories, with systems and languages and so on? Can they still know themselves? Often no. This brings us Freud and Carl Jung into the picture. The text behaves like an unconscious mind. Associations leap, symbols recur, people merge into archetypes. Places become emotional containers. Jung would recognize the enema in Shiraz, the shadow in the political machinery, the self glimpsed only in fleeting harmonies between fragments. And then Eric Newman, student of Jung, wrote of the development of consciousness from primordial wholeness into differentiated conflict. Ismailov seems to show the reverse. Consciousness over-differentiated into pieces yearning to become whole again. And Freud would focus on repetition compulsion. Why do we revisit the wounds? Why do nations reenact disasters? Why does desire return to what damaged it? The novel answers not with theory, but with rhythm. Because the refrain returns because memory insists. And memory in this book is not gentle. It does not preserve things as they were. It edits, corrupts, beautifies, and torments. This is why the prose often feels dreamlike. One image dissolves into another. A city becomes a face, a lover becomes a language, a historical wound becomes a domestic silence. It resembles the logic of dreams and also the logic of databases. In unrelated entries linked by hidden tags, there are moments that feel almost like Dostoevsky's books, his narratives, in their moral claustrophobia. Dostoevsky understood that consciousness can become a prison cell furnished with mirrors. And on the other hand, Hamid Ismailov understands it too. His speakers are not merely remembering, they're trapped in remembering. At other times, the atmosphere turns Poe-like. Edgar Allan Poe specialized in interior dread, in minds haunted by their own chambers. Here, the haunted house is collective memory. The floorboards creak with history. And then Shakespeare appears, as he always does, with identity fractures in the book. This novel has something of Hamlet in it. Not the plot, but the condition. A mind unable to move cleanly through time. A person surrounded by ghosts. Language used both to reveal and evade truth. The time is out of the joint, says Hamlet. That could be the secret epigraph of we computers. It also carries traces of Macbeth, the stain that cannot be washed, the repetition of guilt, the hallucination produced by ambition and blood. Political crimes never stay buried. They become weather in the next century. Even King Lear flickers here, the stripping away of titles, systems, false securities, until only vulnerable humanity remains on the heath. And yet, Ismailov is not derivative. He is in dialogue. Now consider Machiavelli. Machiavelli knew that power survives by mastering appearances. Total systems curate narratives. The novel's fragmented testimonies resist that curation. They say no single official story can contain what happened. The Ghazal becomes anti-propaganda. Multiplicity itself becomes a rebellion. And Ivan Pavlov also haunts the margins, conditioning stimulus and response, citizens trained by slogans, lovers trained by absence, readers trained by modern media to expect coherence and reward. And Hamid Ismailov denies that reward. He deconditions you, he forces patience. And that patience is rare now, which is precisely why the novel matters. We live in an era with algorithmic attention. Fast takes, flattened narratives, instant outrage, instant forgetting. We computers, the book, slows perception down and then breaks it apart so you can inspect the gears. It asks whether consciousness itself has been colonized by the machine logic of speed, storage, and efficiency. Then quietly, it offers poetry as a resistance. Not simplistic poetry, not decorative language, poetry as a mode of knowing that tolerates ambiguity, contradiction, silence. Aristotle distinguished between history and poetry by saying poetry speaks of universals while history recounts particulars. And Ismailov fuses them together. Historical trauma enters poetic form and becomes universal without losing its scars. Plato feared poets because they move souls beyond rational control. He would distrust this book. Socrates would interrogate every voice in it, and asking what they mean by memory, self, truth. Aristotle would admire how structure generates emotion through recurrence. And Ernest Hemingway, strangely enough, belongs here too. Hemingway prized omission, the iceberg principle. What matters is often submerged. Ismailov works similarly, through musically rather than minimally. The silences carry fright. What is not said can bruise harder than what is spoken. The emotional core of the novel, however, remains longing. Longing for coherence, longing for homeland, longing for an unbroken self, for a language untouched by politics, longing for the beloved who may be person, place, God, memory, or all four at once. That is why the Ghazal was inevitable. No other form could hold this much beautiful damage. And when the novel ends, it does not end cleanly. It lingers like a refrain you cannot shake. You look at your phone differently, at archives differently, at the phrase "we" differently. Because Ismailov has made you suspect that modern civilization did not merely invent computers, it imitated it. We sort, we retrieve, we optimize, we quantify, we repeat, we archive every photograph and forget the day it was taken. We know the price of everything and the weight of almost nothing. So the title becomes prophecy, accusation, elegy. We computers, not machines aspiring to be humans, humans forgetting how not to be machines. So I guess this is it, guys. Please leave your comments below and your likes, and see you in the next video.